I was reborn into a story already written in blood, into the body of the woman whose death had once driven the tyrant Leon mad. When Leon turned 17 and prepared to march to war, I clutched his sleeve and whispered the words that would change everything. I want to marry you. Because I already knew how this tale would end. Once Leon left the capital, the so-called male lead would come for me. He would claim me, use me, and turn me into the weapon that shattered Leon. I would die, and Leon would lose his mind. So this time, I refused to let fate play its part. I would not let Leon go. Chapter 1. I clutched the hem of Leon Chu's robe and cried at his feet. He couldn't harden his heart against me. Frowning, he crouched down and gently placed a hand on my shoulder. For the 100th time, he said patiently, "The borderlands are harsh, Mira. It's no place for you." Leon Chu, the Emperor's 5th son, the legitimate son of the Empress herself. 17 years old, proud, noble, and yet now in public, he bent his knees for me. But I didn't care about propriety. When he knelt, I took the chance to press into his arms. I wrapped my arms around his waist without hesitation. "I'm going with you," I said. I couldn't be separated from him, because I knew that once we parted, there would be no after. The male lead would come to my family's door and demand me. He would use me to restrain Leon, to manipulate him. I would become the knife held to Leon's throat. Leon would falter. He would lose. He would fall from grace, from the heavens to the mud. I would die in humiliation, and then he would lose his mind. I already knew this ending. I had lived it once before, and I refused to let it happen again. I had been born again into this world, a world whose story I already knew by heart. The moment I opened my eyes, I knew who I was, and I knew who the destined male lead and female lead were. I knew how the story would unfold, and I knew the tragic fate waiting for Leon Chu. For 15 years, I tried to avoid him, but I couldn't. How could I turn away from the boy who, though a prince among princes, showed me nothing but tenderness and patience? I was frail since childhood, and it was always Leon by my side, carrying me when I couldn't walk, rushing to me whenever I called, sitting by my bed through long nights of fever. He kept me in his eyes, and the entire palace could see it, including his elder brother, Adrian Chu, the fated hero of this world. Leon protected me, so I had to protect him. He loved me deeply, and I loved him just as much. Those 15 years in this world were not in vain. Loving him was far too easy. At 15, Leon was made a prince. At 17, he was ordered to lead an army to war. The emperor, still in his prime, had many sons. This campaign would prove which of them was worthy. If Leon returned victorious, he would become crown prince, heir to the throne. If not for Adrian Chu's interference. So, for him and for myself, I had to go with him. I buried my face in Leon's chest and cried. I felt his body stiffen beneath my hands. For years we had kept our distance, bound by etiquette and the eyes of the court. This was the first time I had ever clung to him like this. He gently patted my back. "I'll be back soon," he murmured. Soft persuasion wasn't enough, so I turned to desperation. Lifting my head, I pulled a dagger from my sleeve and pressed it against my throat. Tears streamed down my face. Leon reached for the dagger, but I gripped it tighter, refusing to let go. He hesitated, his brow furrowed, voice sharp. "Mira Ming." I looked straight at him and spoke calmly. 2 days ago, the third prince came to visit my father. They talked all afternoon. Before leaving, he gave me a white jade hairpin, a white jade pin, a token lovers exchanged in secret. Presented before one's parents, it meant engagement. Leon's face changed. "I don't want to marry him," I said. "But brother Leon, if you leave, if that day really comes..." I pressed the dagger harder against my skin. I could smell the faint trace of blood. A thin line of red trickled down my neck. I might as well die now. That broke him. Leon seized my wrist, forcing the dagger from my hand. It clattered to the floor with a sharp metallic ring. He reached to check my wound, but I gave a bitter smile. "You can stop me this time," I said softly. "But next time, when you're gone..." "Brother Leon, do you believe me? The day your horse leaves the city gates, I'll be hanging from the rafters by a silk rope. You can't stop me." Leon's eyes darkened. He scooped me up by the waist, glaring at me for the first time in his life. Then he turned coldly to his servant. "Summon Imperial Physician Chang." In the end, Leon smuggled me out of the capital, hidden among the grain supply convoy. He wore soft silver armor, his long hair tied high behind his head as he bent down to help me into rough servant's clothes. I reached up and brushed his eyelashes with my fingers. At noon, when the army gathered before the gates, he stood at the front, solemn, cold, unapproachable. But here, in the quiet of a wooden cart, his eyes were soft, his hands gentle as he straightened my collar. I lifted my arms and looped them around his neck. He froze. It was a bold, indecent gesture, a crime against every rule of propriety. But I buried my face against his shoulder anyway. He hesitated only a moment, then rested his chin lightly on my shoulder. His voice was low, teasing. "So you think acting spoiled will make me forgive you?" He leaned back slightly, his gaze falling on the healing scar at my throat. "You've grown reckless, Mira," he said quietly. "You dare raise a knife against yourself. For that alone I should punish you." I smiled against his shoulder. I knew him too well. This was the only way to make him falter, the only way to break through his restraint. He asked softly, "Have you really thought this through?" I blinked up at him, unsure what he meant. He smiled faintly. "If you come with me, how will you explain it to your parents?" "I left them a letter," I murmured, playing with a strand of his hair. "My father was one of the few neutral scholars in court, and my mother was of royal blood. They weren't the ones in danger. Leon was. I had to stay by his side. They know who I love," I said. "They'll tell others I'm ill." It was shamelessly open, and I didn't care. Leon laughed, quietly, helplessly. He tilted my chin, studying my face. "So that's how you talk once you leave the capital," he said. "I wasn't born for this era. I had none of its timid restraint." So I leaned in even closer. Our breaths mingled. Neither of us pulled away. "Then look closely," I whispered. "See me clearly, brother Leon. See who I've become." He stared at me for a long time. The cart creaked, hay rustling beneath our feet. Then he sighed, rubbing the back of my head, pressing my forehead to his shoulder. For a long time, we stayed that way. Then his voice came, low and steady at my ear. "Mira, you must never say such words to anyone else." I wrapped my arms around his back in silence. The borderlands were bitterly cold, and war was cruel. No matter how carefully Leon tried to protect me, I couldn't avoid the truth of battle. Supplies ran low, refugees turned to looting. The enemy pressed closer by the day. Spies and traitors hid among our ranks. This was no test run. The Emperor demanded a victory that would prove his son's worth. Dressed as a guard, I stood behind Leon as he discussed strategy, his arm bound in a sling. When the meeting ended, some of the generals looked my way. Leon noticed at once. He stood just enough to block me from sight. "Dismissed," he said calmly. When the others were gone, he turned to me, his expression softening. "What are you thinking about?" I looked at his injured arm and quietly unwrapped the bandages to tend it. The story of this world was my only anchor, the script I remembered from before, and everything was unfolding exactly as it had been written, even the wound on Leon's right arm. It was identical to the original plot. So I was relieved. Relieved that my interference hadn't changed the timeline. But I still hoped that when this campaign ended, I could persuade Leon to step away from fate. We couldn't fight destiny. Anyone who stood against the destined hero was destined to become the villain. I couldn't let Leon become that. So when he returned victorious, I planned to tell him, either we leave power behind forever, or we submit to the hero's side. I had watched too many miracles save Adrian Chu. He would always survive. We would not. I was cowardly and selfish. All I wanted was for Leon and me to live. "Brother Leon," I said, tying off his bandage. He reached out with his uninjured arm, pulling me close until I sat on his lap. The western sun burned against his darkened skin, hardening the beauty of his face into something fierce. I cupped his cheek. "We'll win," I whispered. "You will win." He smiled faintly and patted my back. "Of course." I held his neck, gazing at him. "Then, when we return to the capital, will you marry me?" It was a shameless question, but I needed to ask. I was of age. I needed certainty. He smiled, amused, brushing a loose strand of my hair. Instead of answering, he said, "Turn around. I'll fix your hair properly." I did, laughing softly. "With one hand?" His fingers moved deftly through my hair. "One hand is enough," he said. "When you were 5 or 6, you were always fidgeting. I used to hold you down with one arm and braid your hair with the other." The war dragged on for 10 full months. Leon's old wounds hadn't healed before new ones were added. In my previous life I studied medicine. I refused to be a burden to Leon, and I refused to stand by while men bled. So I apprenticed myself to the army physician and ran among the wounded every day. The border never changed, pale, barren, with little sense of seasons. In my 20th letter to my parents, I finally wrote the words, "I'm coming back." On the day Leon returned in triumph, I heard the roar from far away. I forced myself to finish stitching a gash on a soldier's arm, bone visible. Then ran out. Hooves thundered, throwing sand and mud into the air. The tall black stallion I knew so well led the column, rearing as someone pulled its reins. Then I saw Leon in the saddle. He held the reins with one hand, and in the other he carried the severed head of the enemy chieftain. Across the noise and the crowd we looked at each other. I watched him dismount cleanly, turn his head to brief his adjutant, and then in a few quick steps he was in front of me. He bent and opened his arms and gathered me in with ease. Pressing against his cold armor, I whispered, "I thought we're not supposed to embrace outside, Brother Leon." A woman's reputation is everything in this era. For more than 10 months, Leon and I never overstepped a public line. No one knew who I was. To them, I was just the medic at his side. At my voice, he shifted and rested his forehead against my neck. He sounded exhausted, his breath carrying the stark chill of the Northwest. "I thought the first thing you'd say was congratulations." I smiled and answered very seriously, "I knew you would win, Brother Leon." I tipped my face up and with my fingertip gently wiped the blood smear from his cheek. "You don't lose." Chapter 2. Victory meant returning to the imperial capital. But halfway home, just past the frozen Northwest and into the warmer Central Plains, a plague swept the camp. It hit like a storm. In a single night, nearly 100 soldiers died. And those infected, the men who had lived, eaten, and fought together, were countless. Leon dragged me out of the infirmary and into his command tent. His first words were to send me away. He all but pulled me along. I asked him what he meant. His tone was cool and factual. Across dynasties with all their sages and healers, no one has solved a plague. "Mira, you must not get sick. You can't stay here." "And you?" I asked. He lifted the tent flap, stepped inside, and finally stopped. After a long moment he faced me. "I can't leave now," he said. He patted my shoulder to soothe me, voice gentle, almost coaxing. "I can't go back to the capital and carry the plague into it. I can't abandon the tens of thousands of soldiers here." I stared at his face. "If you can stay, I can stay. Brother Leon, I'm a physician officer." He cut me off almost before I finished. "No. Mira, I'm your brother Leon. That means I'm allowed to be selfish. I must protect you, keep you safe, keep you far from danger. But I'm also their general. I must protect them. I can't leave them." I kept my eyes on his. I swallowed and said, "I won't get sick. I'm not leaving." He suddenly smiled, the way he did when we were young. Spoiling, soft, without limits, a smile that belonged only to me. "This time," he said, "you don't get to decide." He took the jade token from his belt and pressed it into my palm, closing my fingers around it. "Mira," he said, "I only ask you to listen this once. If you listen now, I promise I'll defer to you in everything after. But this time, you must defer to me." He rubbed my fingers, choosing his words. "This plague is strange. We just left the severe cold of the northern wastes, and then it suddenly broke out from within our ranks. It has to be cured and investigated. I can only focus if you go." He placed the token, his insignia, firmly in my hand. "I've assigned men to escort you. With this token, no one will stop you on the road. Once you're back, give it to your parents." He looked straight into my eyes and lowered his voice. "Mira, I won't make empty promises. Everything I promised you, I remember. Take this token. This is my proposal. The day I return to the capital will be the day I bring you into the Crown Prince's residence." He was still young, full of pride and untamed fire that belonged only to him. My heart trembled, but in front of this Leon, I couldn't hesitate. I only cried silently and asked, "Will you be all right, Brother Leon?" He sighed helplessly and wiped my tears. "Brother Leon will be fine." "When will you come back?" He tied a white cloak around my shoulders. "I won't make you wait long, 2 months at most. Promise you won't lie to me." He held my gaze and repeated, "Brother Leon won't lie to you." I looked up at him, almost pleading. "But I still don't want to go. I want to watch over you. I'm scared. I worry about you." I clutched his sleeve. The plague, something outside the script, left me shaken and on edge. I didn't dare guess what it meant. I only knew I couldn't leave Leon. I believed that if I stayed with him, we would both be safe. He sighed softly over my head. His hand slid from my cheek to the back of my head. He called me by my childhood name, close and tender. Before I could answer, he whispered, "I'm sorry." A heavy blow struck the back of my neck. Everything went dark. When I woke again, I was in a carriage returning to the capital. The curtain lifted in the wind. Outside, spring was in full bloom, sunlight stabbing at my eyes. My neck was stiff and aching. My head swam. I pushed myself up and by instinct searched for Leon. But when I lifted the flap, only a plain-clothed driver sat up front, one of Leon's shadow guards. He heard me move and glanced back, voice respectful and low. "Half a day more, my lady, and we'll reach the capital." I held my head. "Where is your master?" He kept the pace fast and steady, turned his head slightly and said, "Before we left, His Highness told me only to reassure you. He'll return soon." Reassure me? But I couldn't feel reassured. "How many days have we been on the road?" I asked. 2. We've changed horses twice." I clenched the jade token. Leon was ruthless, but he didn't know this. The plague didn't frighten me. The unknowns in the capital did. I slipped back into the city and returned home quietly. In the middle of the night, without resting, I went straight to my parents. I repeated Leon's words to them, every last one. I told them we shared the same heart. I told them I would marry no one else. My mother covered her face and cried. "Improper," hovered on her lips, but she didn't say it to me. My father looked at the white jade gleaming in candlelight and only sighed. To match the excuse of recuperating, and to avoid attention, the next day I went quietly to Pugong Temple outside the city. I meant to pray in earnest and keep my head down, but on the second day I met the male lead's grand procession. The imperial consort came to offer incense. Leon wasn't there. His elder brother Adrian Chu attended her. Adrian stopped me on the path behind the temple. He acted as if he knew everything, and as if he had run into me by chance. He leaned on a tree, posture lazy. His first words were a crafted concern. "Haven't seen you in a while, Mira. Have you recovered?" I looked at his handsome, rakish face and the ease in his eyes. I bowed my head and murmured, "I still need a few more days." He took 2 steps closer. I forced myself not to retreat. He bent toward me as if to examine me. His fingers skimmed a lock of hair at my temple. "So wan," he said lightly. "You really are ill." He smiled for no reason. "Seeing you sick, I think I'm sick too." I didn't understand his strange words then. Half a month of calm passed, and an imperial edict crashed down on me. Prince Adrian had fallen gravely ill. The court astrologer declared that only marriage to a woman of the wood element, born on a specific day and hour, could save him. The emperor was old and deeply enamored with divination. Almost the same day the astrologer finished his calculations, he ordered the search for an unmarried noblewoman whose birth chart matched. Finding me was only a matter of time. When the decree reached Pugong Temple, I was at a window, reading Leon's letter. The paper was pale yellow. Inside was a pressed sprig of forsythia. Thin stem, whole petals. He wrote about the current situation. The plague was man-made, he said, and they had contained it. He wrote about missing me, about the hairpin I'd left behind, about a skinny yellow cat he had picked up. The flower had lain against the paper so long it scented the page. I ground the ink and began my reply. "Brother Leon, Mira is well." Just then, a eunuch's sharp, eager voice rang through the quiet temple. Everything after that was a jumbled dream. I had no choice. I had no time to hesitate. It was all too fast, too rushed. The wedding date, chosen by the Bureau of Astronomy, was set for the very next day. They carried me down the mountain, took me home, dressed me in red, painted my face. I barely had time to look at my parents' faces, half worry, half forced joy. Pipes blared. Red paper covered every surface. They brought me into Prince Yi's manor under a forest of lanterns. I thought about running, but maids and eunuchs surrounded me at all times, and they all knew martial arts. Escaping under their noses was a fantasy, and if I fled, it would be defying the imperial will. My parents, my family, everyone under the Ming roof, 4 generations and 100 souls, would be branded traitors. Prince Adrian was gravely ill, unable to rise. I bowed to heaven and earth, holding a rooster in my arms. Only when they finally brought me into his bedchamber did I find a shred of quiet. The room was dressed in festive crimson. The red stung me eyes. Even the wine and fruit couldn't mask the heavy scent of herbs. I sat at the table and lifted my own veil. On the bed, only a few steps away, Adrian wore red underclothes and lay with eyes closed. Sleeping? Unconscious? I had a hairpin hidden in my sleeve. I stared at his bare throat. If I struck, if I killed the fated son of this world, would Leon be safe at last? But if Adrian Chu ceased to exist, would this world exist? At the edge of my sight, his lashes trembled as if he felt my burning stare. He opened his eyes, clear, aware. He curled his lips and smiled at me. Then he began to gasp and cough. The physicians and eunuchs outside heard it and burst in. I was shoved back behind the table. I kept my eyes on the man on the bed, watching him act the invalid, watching him offer his pulse to a circle of physicians. Everyone knelt, thanking heaven for returning their prince. Hands grabbed mine, tugged at my sleeve, praising us as a match made in heaven, fated husband and wife, saying the moment I entered the house, the prince recovered. I stared at the farce, at this world with Adrian Chu at its center. People of this era believe in gods above and ghosts below. Stories spread fast. Soon, from court to market, everyone repeated the tale that my marriage had saved the third prince. In the original plot, Adrian's proposal was pure pressure. Our union was quiet, never this loud or celebrated. Leon's horse had likely barely reached the city gates when the news of my happy marriage to his brother reached him. After the wedding, Adrian's health recovered quickly. By the third day, he was walking freely. Because of his condition, the royal family granted us a special grace. We had not yet been required to pay respects at court. On the third night, he pushed open the door to my room, wearing dark underclothes. Incense burned. Red candles washed the white window screens in color. I sat by the window and watched him come closer. In the original story and in this one, I was the first woman he married properly. He stopped in front of me with a cup of wine, smiling faintly. On our wedding night, I was unwell. We never drank the nuptial wine. I looked up at him but did not take the cup. "Is that necessary?" He raised an eyebrow and reached to pull me up. Voice gentle. "We are husband and wife." He wanted me to give up hope. He wanted to crush Leon. He wanted to make our marriage real, undeniable. I shifted aside without making a show of it and looked toward the courtyard pear tree in bloom. "If I don't want to," I said, "you won't succeed." I meant the wine. And not just the wine. The room was quiet for a long time. I could hear the candles crackle. Adrian didn't move. He stood behind me as if watching me for a long while. At last he leaned to my ear, his smile edged. "Married to me, and you still mean to keep chastity for him?" I didn't react. After a long silence, he left. He didn't sleep in my room. Adrian was the bearer of destiny in this world. One day he would have thousands in his harem. He had already achieved his goal by marrying me. He had no reason to waste time here. The plot had shattered completely. As if to punish my earlier defiance and delusion, details no longer matched the original in any way. I couldn't control the direction anymore. 10 days after the wedding, I entered the palace with Adrian to greet the emperor. And in the great hall, I met Leon returning from war. I wore layers of heavy finery. I lifted my skirt to cross the threshold. At the first glance up, I saw the tall, familiar figure in the center of the hall. I froze. Adrian turned, brushed my sleeve, and took the hand hidden beneath it. His grip felt light, but I couldn't pull free. In front of everyone, he smiled gently, playing the considerate husband. He bent and whispered, "Mira, mind the step." I turned my head away from him. When I looked up again, Leon was already looking at me. I kept my eyes lowered and didn't meet his gaze, but I could feel it, deep cold, fixed on me. His eyes swept over my elaborate gown, then down to the hands Adrian and I held. Adrian turned us and offered cheerful congratulations to the victorious Leon. At last I lifted my eyes to Leon's face. In a month, he had grown thinner. Same person, same face, same eyes, yet we stood a breath apart and could not approach each other. He ignored Adrian completely. He only looked at me, as if I reached out, he would take me and lead me away. He stared so long that Adrian laughed and asked playfully, "Fifth brother, why do you stare at my Mira?" So long that the emperor asked what was wrong. I moved my lips and finally said in a low voice, "Congratulations on your victory, your highness." Leon's eyes held no one else. "That's all you want to say to me?" he asked. I didn't look up again. I only nodded. The last time we met, I could still hold his hand and fall into his arms. This time, I stood on the opposite side. Fate's punishment hung over my head, and the era's power rules pressed down. I hardly dared overstep again. After that meeting, I hid myself inside Prince's manor and thought of many things. I didn't even dare to pray for a future with Leon Chu. I only wished he would live, healthy and safe. I combed through the original plot and details, trying to find a break in it, a way to wrest a living path for him. He was too good a man to be only the backdrop that made the male lead shine. He didn't deserve such a brutal end. Spring blurred away outside the window. Early summer had come. Adrian Chu entered, maids following with dresses and jewelry. He raised a hand and they surrounded me. He sat casually at the edge of the couch, eyes fixed on mine with interest. "Come into the palace with me tonight. It's Fifth Brother's victory banquet, a family feast. As his sister-in-law, you must appear." I rarely spoke with Adrian. We didn't meet often in Prince's manor. Even when we did, he spoke. I remained silent. This time was the same. I sat quietly before the mirror and let the maids paint my face. A long-fingered hand reached over and pinched my chin. The maid's hands froze. I was forced to meet Adrian's eyes. A smile always hung at his lips, mocking, flirtatious. He leaned to my ear. "I'm curious, are you this dead to the world in front of him too?" My face did not change. I only looked at his insolent smile. Chapter 3 music rang through the hall. Cups and plates clinked. I sat at Adrian's left hand. Leon sat above us at the head. If I only lifted my head, I could see a corner of his sleeve. Eunuchs hovered to serve us, but Adrian waved them aside and watched me himself, peeling shells, picking dishes, pouring wine and water. He wanted to fix our marital bliss in everyone's eyes, especially Leon's. I did not look at Leon again. I only heard the eunuchs' steps passing behind me again and again. They kept refilling Leon's table. He was not a man who drank for sport, nor did he like to lose reason. But tonight, he drank more than usual. I couldn't sit there any longer. After one glance at Adrian, I left the hall first. Maids and guards followed. I stood in a pavilion and watched the early lotus in the pond. Suddenly it went quiet behind me. I turned slightly as a hand rested lightly on my shoulder. I didn't need to look or listen to know who stood there. "Why did you come out?" I kept my eyes on the lotus and asked Leon. I heard his breath, wine warm. His first words were an apology. "Mira, brother broke his promise." I blinked, but the tear still fell. He turned me by the shoulders, wiped the tear from my face, and set his forehead against mine. I came back too late. He was the Leon I knew. His movements, his eyes, the strength of his hands. I looked at his face and rasped, "Brother Leon?" "I'm here," he said. I cupped his cheeks. "Are you hurt? Are you sick?" He shook his head. "Neither." He asked, "And you?" Tears never held before Leon. Since childhood, he had carried all my storms. I almost never cried before my parents. I showed my true face only to him. I cried and shook my head. "I'm fine, brother, I'm fine." He lowered his eyes to me. "But I'm not." He said only that, showing a rare fracture, then changed the subject at once. His forehead still against mine, the night wind moving between us, he said, "Wait for me. I'll come for you soon." His easy tone hid too much. I asked softly, "What are you going to do?" He soothed me with a smile, "Just wait." In the carriage back from the palace that night, Adrian sat across from me. He stared for a long time. Once we passed through the palace gate, he spoke, sounding truly curious. Propping his cheek in his hand, he smiled. "Mira, what is it about you? He values you this much." Then he added lightly, "Enough to hand over the crown prince's seat." I snapped my head up. "What did you say?" He had hooked my curiosity, but he said no more. He only smiled and lounged back, watching me with interest. I didn't know what agreement he and Leon had reached, but after that, Leon managed to climb over the walls of Prince's manor to see me. We could speak through the window. By moonlight, I could trace his face. I received a letter from him. It was simple. "Mira, brother as well." He had seen it, the half-line I wrote at Puguang Temple, so he gave me a late answer. The letter gave me hope, just enough. We still had a future. He would be fine. I would be fine. In contrast, Adrian seemed to vanish from my world. He hardly appeared before me again. I was a bird in a gilded cage, but Leon always found ways to reach my side. I almost believed such quiet days could last. But the world outside had no patience for my hopes. The old emperor grew weaker by the day. The battle for the throne grew fiercer. Everyone wanted the dragon seat. On the day of the start of summer, the night brought a city-wide curfew. Soldiers in heavy armor lined the streets, pressing toward the palace. Prince Yi's manner was especially quiet. Leon did not appear under the moon with a smile. Adrian even less so. I stood at the window all night, until the first line of light. A maid ran to me, face alight. My lady, the prince, oh no, the emperor summons you to the palace." Her joy washed over me, but I didn't hear it. I only grabbed her arm and asked, "Where is Leon Chu?" In my urgency, I forgot all courtesy and called him by name, but the maid didn't seem to notice. She only urged me to dress and go greet the new emperor. Red walls, deep courtyards. I lifted my skirt and walked inward step by step, but I did not find Leon. I searched every hall and chamber. I walked through the wreckage of a palace after battle. I did not see him. He did not appear before me. At last I spent my strength and stopped before the quarters he had used in the palace. I sank onto the threshold. Once noisy with visitors, the place seemed cut off from the world. Only desolation remained. I sat hugging my knees until midnight. He still did not come. A long time passed. The crescent climbed high. A pair of boots entered my sight. The man reached out his hand, gold-threaded black robe, and then... not the face I wanted. In a few days, Adrian had shed his former levity. Power pressed from him in waves. He took my hand without letting me refuse, leaned close and asked in a low voice, "What are you grieving?" "A new dynasty over an old sacrifice is normal," he said. "Walls behind walls." Even in summer, the palace was ice-cold. Adrian led me through the silent corridors between stone and stone. At the final step, he said, Leon lost his nerve and wanted to yield the seat. He glanced at me. "But this isn't a boys' game between brothers. It's the struggle of all the factions. Born royal, wanting is hard, not wanting is harder." Leon's act of yielding chilled the great families. He stopped and leaned in as if reading me by moonlight. Then he finished very slowly. "Killing him as a sacrifice steadied their pride. It gave them a reason to turn to me." He spread his arms as if to show me his realm. And that is how I rose so smoothly. I breathed deep, pressing my face blank and my feelings down. When I heard my own voice, it was stranger for how calm it sounded. "Where is his body?" Adrian flicked me a glance. Though branded a rebel, Leon was still royal. He was buried in the imperial tombs. They were quick about it. "He's already in the ground." Buried. His two words churned a storm inside me. I could not think beyond one image. Leon beneath the pear tree in the courtyard, tall and still, moonlight washing him pale and beautiful, tying a kite string to my wrist, saying, "Next time we meet, we'll fly it." I still had the kite. Where was he? Only 3 days, and he was already under the earth? Rage surged up, blinding. Blades and arrows on the battlefield hadn't killed him. The plague hadn't taken him. But in the capital, his birthplace, the safest place, he died. The fury burned away my reason. I moved before I knew it. Back in Prince Yi's manor, Leon often came to me. I couldn't go out, so he brought me many things, including a dagger. I had kept it hidden in my sleeve. Now under the moon it saw light. The tip cut Adrian's neck. Blood beaded and slid. He only smiled, interested, making no move to stop me. "Angry, are you?" I pushed harder. The blade sank into his flesh. He seemed not to feel pain. He spoke my name very gently, watching me seriously. "Mira, do you love him that much? If you kill me, you will never see him again." I didn't believe him. I hated him too much. I hated Adrian Chu. I didn't pull back. I drove the dagger deeper. Footsteps landed behind me. Someone caught my hand. A voice above my head said softly, "Mira, if you kill him, we can't get out." I let go and turned. In the moonlight, Leon stood in black, a cut on his cheek, looking down at me. Fear and shock stole my voice. I only stared into his face, his eyes searching. I frowned, hoarse. "Brother Leon?" He eased the dagger from my fingers. "I'm here." I spoke again. "Brother?" He answered with a soft hum and guided my hand to his face. "I'm here," he said. "He lied to you." In grief and joy so sharp, I could do nothing but stare. Leon bent and gathered me into his arms. At the feel of real warmth, I finally clutched him back, with all the strength I had never used in my life, as if holding a treasure lost and found. His chest shook as he spoke over me to Adrian. "How bad is it?" Adrian's voice was light as ever. I could hear a small shake of his head. "Nothing serious." Leon's tone went cold. "Why scare her?" Adrian laughed. "It was interesting. I'd never seen her angry. I wanted to. I wanted to see how she looks when it's for you. So she really loves you, she really would kill. Leon's arm tightened around my back. His voice cooled. You went too far. We left the glittering capital behind, the city that had raised us, loved us, and destroyed us. All I ever wanted was to survive with Leon. Back then, I thought there were only two ways to live: to run far from the grasp of power or to surrender to destiny itself. But Leon chose both. Before the coup, he had already stood beside the so-called hero. After it, he didn't linger a moment. He simply took my hand and led me away. 17 years in this world. 17 years of walking on the edge of fear and fate. And for the first time, it was quiet. One golden afternoon, I fell asleep on Leon's chest. When I woke, sunlight was spilling through the shutters, and a thought came to me. The heroine, the woman who, in the story I once knew, should have stood at Adrian's side. By the time Adrian took the throne, she had never appeared. Her absence felt like a missing heartbeat in a tale that was supposed to repeat itself. I turned to Leon, said her name, and asked if he'd ever heard of her. He looked up from the book in his hands, paused, and shook his head. Never heard of her. I searched my own memories. Nothing. And I knew I wasn't wrong, so it wasn't just us who had changed. The world itself had rewritten its script. Leon had not become the mad tyrant I once knew. Adrian had not met the girl of destiny. And I had survived the story that was meant to kill me. Still, one question lingered. I spoke of the letter he'd once written me in the manor, the one that had kept me alive. He thought for a while, then gave a faint, helpless smile. Mira, you must have remembered wrong, he said softly. I could see you every day back then. Why would I send a letter when seeing you was enough? He never wrote to me. Then who did? Who sent me that 6-character letter, written in his voice? Brother Leon as well. Who found the half-finished note I left behind at Puguam Temple? Whose hands carried it? A realization brushed against the edge of my mind. The only possible answer. But I refused to look at it. I couldn't. Not anymore. On the night of the coup, the world had burned. Adrian was the one who found me first, his hand cold but steady as he led me through shattered walls, past the ruin and the screaming, until we reached Leon, waiting in the shadows. That night was the end of everything between the three of us. And the beginning of what little peace remained. Since then, I've wanted nothing else. No throne, no vengeance, no destiny. Only this man before me, the man who once walked through fire for me, and the quiet life we stole back from fate.